Illuminated Bible Story Book for Young People by Elizabeth Morton. Printed in the U.S.A., copyright 1927, published by the John C. Winston Company, Chicago, Philadelphia, Toronto. Includes 20 colored illustrations. Today's reading is Jesus in the Temple. Jesus was just about 3 years old when his father and mother took him to live in the village of Nazareth. Joseph, his father, was a carpenter, and we can imagine the boy Jesus helping his father in the shop. Perhaps he helped to carry the wood for his father to saw, and then at the end of the day, we may be sure that he helped to sweep up the shavings in the little room. When he was about 5 years old, he began, like other Jewish boys, to read the Old Testament scriptures, that portion of the Bible that was written before Jesus was born. In this Old Testament, he delighted to read the stories of Ruth and of David and of Saul, and no doubt he committed many parts of it to memory, for that was the usual training of Jewish children of that time. On the Sabbath day, he went with his family to worship in the synagogue or Jewish church. Here he sat on the floor and heard the Old Testament read and explained, and the Bible tells us that he so formed the habit of going to the synagogue that after he grew up and had left his home, he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. Later on, he was sent to the village school, for his parents were too poor to send him to a higher school. In this village school or synagogue, as it was called, since it was held in the synagogue or place of worship, Jesus studied the scriptures. Since there were no school books, such as boys and girls have today, they had to remember what the teacher or rabbi taught them. It is easy for us to believe that Jesus was never a dull pupil, and that he was always ready and able to answer the many questions of the rabbi. The scripture lessons that Jesus and his little schoolmates learned were not printed as lessons are today, but were written with a stylus, a sharp-pointed instrument, on skins or rolls of parchment, which were unrolled for reading and then carefully rolled up and put away. Jesus never had a Bible of his very own, and perhaps his father had only a few parts of the Old Testament, because the whole was too costly for poor people. But we read that Jesus continued to advance in wisdom. A Jewish boy, when he was 12 years of age, was supposed to be able to interpret the teachings of the scripture and understand the service of the synagogue. It was at this time that he first went to Jerusalem to worship and to attend the great feast of the Passover. This was a great yearly pilgrimage for all Jews. How joyous Jesus must have felt when at 12 years of age he was to be taken with Joseph and Mary for the first time to the great Passover feast. In April, just at the finest time of the year for traveling, Joseph and Mary and the boy left their home in Nazareth on the long journey of 80 miles to the holy city. They did not travel alone, for other pilgrims from the villages and towns along the way joined them. And what a picture that caravan must have made as it traveled southward. The old men and the women rode on camels and donkeys and horses, and the young men walked, holding their long walking sticks in one hand, while with the other they led a beast of burden. Jesus, like the other boys, walked until he grew tired, and then no doubt he was allowed to mount a horse or a donkey. If you can remember your first visit to the city or to some great fair, you know just how excited and eager to get there the boy Jesus was as they drew near the great city of Jerusalem, with its high walls, great temples with bazaars, strange music, and crowded streets. It was one of the greatest days in his life, and though he was but a boy, he began to feel that he was the Son of God, and that he was anointed with the oil of gladness above his fellows. It was in the temple that Jesus loved to stay during his parents' sojourn in Jerusalem, sitting at the feet of the wise teachers, listening to them and asking questions. No such pupil had ever before sat at their feet. No other Jewish boy had made such answers so that all that heard him were astonished at his understanding. Jesus himself was so filled with the worship of the temple, so enthralled with the teachings of the rabbis, that when the feast was over and Mary and Joseph started homeward to Nazareth, he tarried in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew it not. How this happened we do not know, but perhaps the caravan of pilgrims traveling together was so large that at first he was not missed. But after they had gone a day's journey and night-time came, Mary missed her boy. At first they sought him among their kinsfolk and friends, but he was nowhere to be found. What had happened to him? Was it possible that some jealous ruler like Herod had discovered him? The next day Joseph and Mary left the caravan and returned to Jerusalem and began seeking their lost boy. And where do you think they found him? Not in the streets playing with other boys, but in the temple with the learned teachers. His father and mother themselves were amazed to see him there, and Mary, anxious yet rejoicing, was first to speak. She did not call him by his name Jesus, but asked gently, "Son, why hast thou thus dealt with us? Behold thy father, and I have sought thee sorrowing." No doubt these were the first words of reproof that Mary had ever spoken to her son. How would he answer her? "Why did you seek me?" he asked sadly. "Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" These words at first must have seemed strange to Mary. Jesus had always been kind and thoughtful and so careful in speech that she could not help wondering. But as Mary thought about them afterwards, she realized that Jesus' words had a deep meaning and that they were very wise. When Jesus told his mother that he must be about his Father's business, he did not mean that he was going to leave his home in Nazareth, or that he was not going to obey his father or mother. Although he knew now that he was the Son of God, he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject unto them. But his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. And so in this little village of Nazareth, Jesus grew up and increased in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man.